So you probably think we learn a language by, imitating our parents and practicing a bunch, right? But what if I told you the real process is way more mysterious and honestly, a lot cooler than that? What if a toddler's brain is pulling off a feat of genius that no supercomputer on Earth can replicate? Let's get into how we really learn a language. First things first, let's tackle a huge assumption a lot of us have, especially if we grew up speaking English. We kind of think that speaking just one language is the default setting for humans. But is it really? The reality? Yeah, not even close. Over half, that's right, more than half, of the world's population is multilingual. So if you only speak one language, you're actually in the global minority. Being multilingual, that's the human norm. And this isn't some new thing either. The linguist François Grosjean points out that throughout all of human history, it's been almost impossible to find a society that was truly, genuinely monolingual. We've always been a species that talks across different languages. So the real puzzle isn't if we learn other languages, it's how. And that story, believe it or not, starts in the most incredible place you can imagine, with a child learning their very first language. It's a process that honestly feels like pure magic. The simple theory is that kids are just little parrots. A parent says bottle, the baby says bottle. Easy. But this whole idea of pure imitation just completely falls apart the second you actually listen to the weird and wonderful things kids say. Think about this classic example. What adults has taked? Nobody. So that kid is definitely not copying. What they're actually doing is way more brilliant. They've figured out a rule, hey, to make something past tense, I add ed, and they're applying it. This isn't copying, it's creation. It's active, subconscious rule building. And this brings us to what linguists call the logical problem of language acquisition. Okay, imagine trying to learn all the complex rules of chess just by watching a few random and sometimes illegal moves. That's exactly what kids do with language. They get this messy, limited, imperfect stream of sounds, and somehow they all build a perfect, incredibly complex system. How on earth do they do that? Well, the most powerful answer we have is that we're basically born for this. The language software comes pre-installed. It's this innate capacity, a kind of universal grammar blueprint. Even with what's called poverty of the stimulus, which is just a fancy way of saying they get messy input, this internal guide lets a child's brain build a perfect grammar from scratch. So our first language isn't so much learned as it is, well, grown. Okay, so that's our first language. But what happens when we, as adults, try to learn a second language, an L2? Well, it turns out we're embarking on a completely different kind of journey. Think about the starting line. A child learning their first language, their L1, is starting with that raw, innate capacity. But an L2 learner? You're showing up to the race with a full toolkit. You already have a whole language. You know how the world works. You know how to talk to people. You are anything but a blank slate. And all that existing knowledge leads to one of the most important ideas in second language learning: transfer. It's this constant, totally unavoidable process where your first language basically bleeds into your second one, shaping everything from your accent to the way you build sentences. Now, this transfer process is a total double-edged sword. Sometimes it's your best friend. When the rules in your native language line up with the new one, it's like you get a freebie. That's positive transfer. But when the rules clash, you get negative transfer, which is what causes all those classic, predictable mistakes every learner makes. And the scale of this L2 journey is just massive. I mean, just look at English. This is wild. There are more than twice as many people who speak English as a second language than as a first. The world of English is overwhelmingly a world of L2 speakers, every single one of them on their own unique learning path. So, if the L2 journey starts from a different place and follows a totally different road, where does it end up? The answer is probably not where you think it is. See, with a first language, every single child basically reaches the finish line. We call it native competence. It's a universal human achievement. But for a second language, the outcome is, well, it's all over the map. Some people get really close to native-like, others don't, and your progress can just stop at any point. There's no guaranteed finish line. This has led thinkers like Vivian Cook to say, hey, maybe we're all chasing the wrong goal. It's not about trying to become a perfect copy of a native speaker. The real goal is to develop something called multilingual competence, which he calls the compound state of a mind with two or more grammars. It's a single complex mind that holds multiple language systems at once. And this just reframes the entire goal, doesn't it?
A second language learner isn't a failed native speaker. Not at all. There's something entirely new and different. A person with this multilingual competence actually thinks differently. They use language differently. They become, as Cook says, a unique combination.
Okay, so let's pull all of this together. We've been on a pretty deep dive into language learning. What's the big takeaway from all this? Why does it matter?
All right, here's the bottom line. First, let's just get it straight. Being multilingual isn't the exception. It's the human norm. Second, you have to appreciate that your first language wasn't just learned. It grew out of this incredible, innate biological blueprint. Third, remember that learning another language is a totally different journey, one that builds on everything you already are. And finally, let's reframe the goal. It's not about achieving some impossible perfection. It's about becoming a unique, competent multilingual.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really provocative thought to chew on. For a global language like English, where second language speakers are the vast majority, does our old idea of the native speaker being the gold standard even make sense anymore? What does it truly mean to be a master of a language that is now genuinely owned by the entire world?